shell out, but my sanity slipped. Borderline line, tightrope I tread. Voices in my head, man, they scream, they beg. I'm the architect of chaos, blueprints unclear. Heartbeats like a kick drum, drowning in fear. Misdiagnosed, lost in the void. Life's a puzzle, every piece destroyed. No strategy, no plan, no fight. Just me and my shadows, chasing the night. Moon swing pendulum, crash to a climb. Burn bridges in seconds, rebuild over time. Mirror reflection, don't know who's staring back. A stranger with my face, living under attack. Therapy sessions, but they ain't hear the tune. I'm howling at the stars, screaming at the moon. Borderline battle, scars on my skin. They see the outside, never the war within. I'm a storm in a bottle, lightning on repeat. A wildfire dancing, but it burns my feet. No manual, no guidebook, no plan. Just a fractured soul trying to understand.
Okay, hi everyone. Happy Friday to every single person who's joining us. I am so excited to have this event with you all today and so excited to bring up our guest as well, who is a subject matter expert in the topic that we're going to be discussing today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Noni. I am the founder of O.Z.K Studios. And O.Z.K Studios is a place where we talk about not just mental health, but also we talk about healing and healing specifically through art. Not only am I an artist and love the arts, but the entire team I work with is an artist of their own kind. And we want to be able to bring a community together where we talk about education, conversations, and art through healing. And our wonderful episode today, focusing on a very, very misdiagnosed, often misunderstood disorder called borderline personality disorder, also known as BPD, is sponsored by one of the most fabulous individuals and companies that they own that I have ever had the opportunity to meet. So thank you very much, guiding brilliant writers, and Miss Nicole, the gifted bipolar writer, for sponsoring this show today. I am very, very thankful and grateful for your participation as well as your partnership in making this happen and bringing amazing individuals up on stage to educate us and inform us and help us be better human beings when it comes to supporting our friends, families, and of course colleagues, since we're all professionals over here. So, uh, I forgot what I was going to say, but yes, I am very excited to bring up our guest on stage. And by the way, I want to clarify something. For those who are not in San Francisco, I'm based out in San Francisco, the Bay Area, and so is our guest. Well, he's currently traveling somewhere else right now. But as you can see that I'm wearing a hoodie, it is cold AF in San Francisco. It is freezing. So my apologies if I look strange wearing a hoodie in this summertime, and everywhere else is, it's really, really warm, it's really, really hot, but here in San Francisco, we're by the ocean. It's foggy, it's cold, it's all of that good stuff. So which is why I need to be cozy when we come to talk together, when we come together to talk about difficult topics and often misunderstood topics. So like I said, our topic of discussion today is borderline personality disorder. And there's one fact that I wanted to share, or two actually, that according to the American Psychological Association, around 1 in 33 people are diagnosed or live with borderline personality disorder. That is still a lot of people, even though it doesn't seem like it. That's a huge group of people who may live with it. And also, according to the gender distribution on the APA journals, it says that around 75% of the people diagnosed with BPD or bipolar, I'm sorry, not bipolar. That's one mistake nobody should make. But BPD, borderline personality disorder, 75% of the people who are diagnosed are women. However, newer studies suggest that men also may have BPD, but they were underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed, with disorders like PTSD or depression. So we want to clarify all those misconceptions that we may have, or if we don't know what borderline is, or if we've never heard of it before, this is an opportunity for us to get educated by someone who is a subject matter expert. Now, Dr. Moriarty, I've known him for some time now, and every time I get an opportunity to talk to him, he delivers some fascinating information about himself. So, if you haven't read any of the LinkedIn posts about this event, I wanted to tell you that this man is not only a certified or and licensed psychotherapist, he's also a licensed social worker. He's also a lawyer who has he works with a lot of lawyers, but we'll call him a lawyer for now. And he's been on TV and different shows, including one of my favorite shows growing up called Unsolved Mysteries. And that was one heck of a show to watch. He's been in there. He is also a author. I'm sorry, he's also an author. I should not say a author. Let's get our English facts right. He's an author and also a musician specifically focusing on drumming. And the most amazing thing about this man is that he's also a music therapist. So he is somebody whose values match with mine as far as O.Z.K Studios is concerned. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, that we believe in art therapy, art healing, practicing art in our own healing journeys. And Dr. Moriarty follows just that. And not only, and aside from just sharing the name with Sherlock Holmes's arch nemesis. So I will be quiet now. I will stop mumbling. And once again, Nick, thank you very much for the guiding brilliant writer sponsorship. I will now go ahead and bring up Dr. Moriarty. Dr. Moriarty, thank you for joining us.
Well, you're welcome. Hi, Noni. It's so nice to be with you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Nice to see you too. And you're where in Indiana right now, right?
I am in Indianapolis, Indiana, where it is very hot and there's no hoodies being worn today. In fact, there's barely any clothes at all. So there was
Oh,
no, yeah, it's about 90 and very muggy, very hot and humid.
well, I'm glad that you're
Oh,
wearing some
blessed.
clothes right now. So that's all.
Yeah,
So
that's all we need is
of that.
snuff.
Very thankful of that. So, and Dr. Moriarty, once again, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come join us and share this conversation or have this conversation with us, because it's not just me who's curious about learning about borderline personality disorder. It's definitely a lot of other people out there, and we want to be able to provide as much knowledge as possible so
Yeah,
those who are not living with it can support our friends and families and coworkers who are living with it.
yeah. And I think in many cases you don't know that someone might not be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, but those behaviors kind of sneak out. And when I describe sort of what they look like and what the behaviors are, then you might get an idea of maybe people that you know that exhibit that kind of thing, and maybe have a better understanding of where it's coming from and how you can how you can work around it and actually help people by just by being more empathetic to their issues, and think of it more as a cry for help in their behavior as opposed to like an offensive sort of like antisocial kind of activity. You'll see what I mean.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And before we go any further, Dr. Moriarty, I just want to mention to everybody who's listening or joining us from either LinkedIn or YouTube that this is a trigger warning for you. So if there's something, if the word, if any kind of abuse kind of makes you uncomfortable or you're not okay with it, I just wanted to give that disclaimer before we even get started, because I think our conversation may get a little bit rough. So if it does, I want you to know about it, prepare yourself for it. So this is my trigger warning for everybody, and I
Yeah,
hope you're all doing well. And Dr. Moriarty, would it be okay for you if we spend a couple minutes just to welcome our audience?
yeah. I welcome. I do welcome the audience, and I really hope that people will chime in and ask questions, because it can be confusing. And if folks have really any questions at all, I think how does the process work, Noni? They
Yep.
they
So
just write in or raise their
there's
hand.
there's all kinds of people joining us from all walks of life, and
Okay.
as you can see, Tracy,
Yeah.
she got invited by somebody named Kenneth Dunner.
Well,
Kenneth is a dear friend of ours, so he is inviting everybody who might be
exactly.
interested in learning.
Jackie, okay. Yeah.
Yep. Then
Um,
there's Jackie. Hi, Jackie.
I see. I see. They're popping up on the screen. How
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
Ginormous huge.
Oh
And
yeah.
Tracy. Yeah. And it's so cool, Noni, that you bring people together here and that you've been working really hard at this podcast and just being involved in the community for so long. It's inspiring, and I'm glad to be able to help.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Moriarty. And like I said, it's a pleasure to have you here. So I'm very thankful that you took the time. And the joyful path from YouTube saying that it's very chilly, or it's chilly in the evening in Vermont as well. I'm so glad
Yeah,
that it's not just San Francisco or the Bay Area in general.
Vermont's beautiful, especially in the fall,
Oh yeah.
chilly times. The joyful
So
path. Wow.
all right, Dr. Moriarty, why don't we go and get started then?
Okay, so how would you like me? You want to?
I'll ask. I'll make sure that we can go with the flow and all that stuff. And when you're answering, I will just bring in more conversations or more things that people bring up.
Okay.
The first thing that I want to ask you, Dr. Moriarty, is just as a clarification thing, because
Mhm.
oh, actually, I forgot to tell you why I want to talk about bipolar. Not bipolar. I keep saying that
Mhm.
borderline personality disorder.
Mhm.
So I have a bachelor's in psychology, and as you know, if you have a bachelor's in psychology, that doesn't really mean anything,
Sure.
but it's more of a generalized study of how psychology works.
Yeah.
And when we were trying to learn about bipolar disorder, I specifically remember that there were the only initials that bipolar disorder got was BD one or two, and then
Mhm.
there was actually a time where I was completely obsessed with with the Law and Order franchise, and one of their franchise branches was called Criminal Intent. And there
Uh-huh.
was an episode where what the culprit or the villain of the show of the episode,
The perp.
he seemed to have bipolar disorder, but the actors or the detectives, you could say, they were referring to bipolar disorder as BPD, and I knew that was not the
Oh, yeah.
case. That was incorrect. So after looking it up, I realized that BPD actually is borderline personality disorder. It was
Mm.
just misinformed through the media, and this is something that's already, misunderstood anyway. So that's why I want to talk more in depth about it. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, when I first started researching and studying with Marsha Linehan, who was kind of the foremost expert on the subject, who wrote the book about how to treat it, who came up with the term and the protocol um, for what's called it's called dialectical behavioral therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, but more specifically for symptoms of BPD. It When I was studying with her, I often confused borderline personality disorder with bipolar disorder, and because it can have that sort of like kind of a Jekyll and Hyde effect, where the person is acts one way and then flips completely to another presentation. For example, someone exhibiting that behavior might you as a presenter might think you're just great, and think shower you with praise and say you're the best presenter I've ever known. You're my hero. I really admire you, and Noni, you're the only person that can present as well as you do. You're the only person that can present this topic with such grace and perfection. And John, you're the only person that could be the interviewee here. You're the only one that knows as much as you do about about the subject, and you're such an expert, and I think you're the best. So it's like this hero worship on one point, making you feel like, oh, I really have an impact with this person. I really am. I really feel good about myself. And then on the same token, some small thing can trigger that person's presentation, so that all of a sudden you're the worst. You're the enemy. You're the devil. And they would become completely against you, and be completely opposed, and do everything they can to mess with your life, and to hurt your feelings, or to make you feel less than you are. And it was just such an odd sort of presentation. It almost seemed like um, bipolar disorder, where one person is like they're completely depressed or they're sad on one end, and then something happens, some trigger happens, a switch sort of flips, and they become manic, and become super elated, and sometimes even think that they're Jesus, and present with this like exuberance, and they don't sleep maybe for 2 or 3 nights in a row, and exhibit this mania. So it had some similar variations, but borderline is a little bit. The difference is borderline is considered a personality disorder for one thing, whereas bipolar is considered a like an organic brain disease or a function of the disease where. And I hope anyone listening will chime in with their opinions or their knowledge too, because I actually, contrary to what you say, Noni, I don't claim to be an expert at just about anything that I do, because I'm always open to hearing other opinions and getting other information from people, especially people living with a particular ailment or issue. So um, the difference being that people with with borderline exhibit, this is more a learned behavior, not it's a imposed behavior, so something from childhood that relates directly to injuries, like injuries to the ego when you're quite young, sometimes older, but usually maybe between ages of 6 months and like 4 or 5 years, and sort of ongoing, like when your feelings are invalidated as a child, you say, "Mommy, my tummy hurts, I'm hungry." Well, then you're not going to get fed. So it's sort of like, or you ever see, I was in the grocery store one time and a kid is crying, and a young mom yelled at the kid and said, "You're stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about." Well, the kid has a need and they're asking for something. They're asking for help. They're asking for support. They're asking for attachment to that parental figure. And they get absolutely the opposite. So it really messes with their head. Like, I'm hungry. I need this. I need a hug. You're not going to get it. And when you ask for it, you're going to get punishment. So it's a total mind confusion. It's a mind duck, as they say. And, and so it confuses the ego, and the kid goes along developing the idea and the notion and the attitude that whatever they ask for is not it's not valid, or their feelings, no matter what their feelings are, they're not entitled to their feelings, and so they don't really know how to manage feelings, and they grow up in life like using their emotions as defense mechanisms or as weapons against people that they feel have done them injustice. I know that seems kind of weird, but the more we discuss it, maybe people will understand better. And I know that the people that experience borderline or have loved ones with it will know what I'm talking about. And bipolar is something that's almost more predictable, and that after the mania, there's usually a fall. There's like a fall off, and like that's the bipolar, the two poles, like happy and sad, or elated and depressed, or energetic and exhausted. So back and forth like that. And it's not necessarily something that's interpersonal. It's not necessarily something that someone uses as a tool in their social interactions in order to gain an advantage, or to fight back according to their perceived threats in life with other people.
Got
So
it. That makes sense, and I appreciate you elaborating that a little bit, because Dr. Misbah Qureshi, she's a fellow doctor, and she says bipolar is under mood disorders and effectively.
exactly, mood disorder versus a personality disorder.
Yep,
But I think by borderline personality disorder, I think hopefully we'll lose that terminology, because I think it's a little bit demeaning. I think it could be more characterized as a trauma response, like a post-traumatic stress response, as opposed to something completely separate that seems to be stigmatized, because a lot of doctors and therapists they don't want to work with people with borderline personality disorder because they have such difficulties with the patients, and unless it's a setting specifically designed to help folks with borderline, it can become it doesn't they don't often fit in well with the system the way it is set up to help people with mental health issues, because it's a whole different category of illness, and it's very interpersonal with providers and others. Yeah.
that makes sense. So, just to clarify a little bit from what I was listening when I was listening to you speak, uh, would you think that, or not? Would you think, but can you say that borderline personality disorders are an extreme version of one type of emotion, versus having a balance?
Yeah, it's a one way to put it. It's an imbalance of emotions, and it's inability to regulate your emotions. You and I might be able to think a little bit before we might be triggered by something. We might be triggered by a family member or someone in our lives, a loved one who says something that we don't agree with or that insults us or makes us feel less than them or bad, we'll be able to think about it first before we just come up with a response. And I think people with borderline are more emotionally volatile and in some ways live and speak to their emotions in real time. So they can seem extremely lovable and happy and like, oh my gosh, the world's so wonderful. You're so wonderful. And when they're in a good mood, you know it, and when they're in a bad mood, you know it too, because they don't have that filter that a lot of us are able to utilize in social situations. And so they run through friends and loved ones often really quickly, and they um, can be ostracized by their community even for that reason.
So why do you think that happens? What do you think is, or I mean, I'm guessing that you've obviously worked with a lot of patients with living with BPD. So from
Mhm.
your experience, then why do you think people have, or what is the history or background in developing BPD for some individuals or for your patients or whatever is easier?
I think it's exclusively, if not, yeah, a trauma response. Like I said, a lot of times I think there was some statistic I remember that something like 91% of folks diagnosed with BPD had experienced childhood sexual abuse. And so it's just like an invalidating of your emotions and what you believe to be appropriate or nurturing to yourself or others. And it's like a contrary sort of message that you get, and it messes with your brain. It's like it's a trauma response from oftentimes childhood sexual trauma, or like I said, having your feelings invalidated over and over again, so you really don't know how to feel, and so you go into the world with it very ill-equipped to cope with your own emotions and to understand other people's emotions. And they'll even say it's even said that folks with BPD lack empathy, and I don't know that that could be true. I think in some cases it may seem that way because they oftentimes come across as not caring what someone else thinks or trying to use the way someone else thinks or believes or what they feel as or weaponizing those feelings so to protect themselves from being hurt further. So it can be real confusing for the people around them because they don't think that they deserve the treatment they're getting. And someone with BPD also might dissociate a lot, meaning they sort of space out and they're not in the moment. They seem to be sort of out of their own bodies and sort of floating somewhere else. And that too is a response from trauma, how they may have had to cope with a childhood full of abuse and rejection or being neglected or just not cared for. So it oftentimes it's a it's a
You men-
reaction to that sort of trauma. And tragically, there's a very high incidence of suicide attempts among folks with BPD. They don't develop their own personality and ego strength they need to function in the world.
So you mentioned neglect and abandonment, and one of the things that I sent you some things earlier, but is abandonment a high level fear for people living with BPD? That is I mean, mentioned that they may seem like they're not empathetic or and they fear rejection and neglect and things like that. So what are some of the boundaries that they can set or the people around them can set to make sure that they know that they're in a secure relationship, that nothing unfortunate is going to happen to them? Any suggestions of that?
I mean, I think really just understanding that like the thing that I like to suggest people sort of place in their mind is that this too shall pass. Like their attitude and their fear and their triggered responses will change, and that you must set very very strict boundaries to them. And other boundary that you need to set is the boundary that you won't let yourself be triggered and you won't allow yourself to be insulted. Or if like I said in the beginning, if you're showering me with praise because in this moment your emotion is, I feel so close to this person, they're helping me, and I think they're so wonderful, I'm going to tell you about it. Well, take that with a grain of salt, because that could flip on its head in a moment when you may accidentally trigger their trauma response, and they might deliver the opposite reaction, like, you're evil, you only want to hurt me, why are you doing this to me, I quit. So to set those boundaries and like not let that affect you as a loved one, and to keep them on course. If we're doing therapy, the therapy for borderline personality disorder called dialectical behavioral therapy is DBT. It sticks very rigidly to repetition, like a broken record. Like, you're not being threatened. You're not being threatened. No one's trying to hurt you. It's okay. It's okay. So you lay down the law and let them know over and over again that you're there. You're not going anywhere. You're not leaving. You're not going to abandon them. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to be here the next day. I'm not going anywhere. So that constant reminder that you're supportive, that you're not going to abandon them, is real important. And if they say, I don't care, I hate you, then you got to take that with a grain of salt. Okay, I know you do. You hate me right now, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to love you, and I'm going to be here for you. So that constant reassurance it may sound ridiculous, but that's just the only thing you can do, because they become so unhinged and so sometimes dissociated. We're not really even hearing you, but they just need to know you're not leaving them. It's like extreme response to being neglected.
I understand that. And thank you for sharing in-depth details about that, because I know that the allies can also feel the strain of it, of
Yeah.
constantly telling their loved ones that, I'm here, I'll be here for you.
Hmm.
So what can the allies do to take care of themselves, because they're consistently telling their loved one living with BPD that everything's good, everything's fine. So what can the allies do to support their own well-being in the whole process?
Well, let me tell a little story about why I ended up getting um, interested in the subject and researched it more. And actually, it is probably why I pursued a career like this in psychotherapy. But I prior to doing this work, I worked as a musician full time. I was in a successful band. We toured a lot and rehearsed. I was away. I had a live-in girlfriend who I was planning to marry, and we shared a tiny apartment in Seattle. And at that point, that person that I was living with, that partner had BPD. I found out later. I didn't know at the time. I was away on tour, and prior to leaving on tour, I'd come home from a rehearsal one night, right on time, no problem. But for some reason, she had gotten into her mind that I was that I was out cheating, or that I was out cheating on her or doing something against the relationship. And she had gotten so worked up about it when I hadn't come home that she cut her wrists. And that's another symptom of borderline is self-mutilation and self-harm. And she had cut her wrists, and she was bleeding all over my favorite records, because she thought that somehow that would get through to me. Um, but she cut a little too hard, and she had cut her wrists and cut her arms, and ended up cutting her thighs as well. And the cuts on her thighs were a little too deep, and she was bleeding a lot and losing a lot of blood, and there was a lot of it on the floor and a lot on the records. I came home, and I was shocked, of course, to see like my partner in a bloody mess on the floor. And and next day I left on tour, and I think I tried to get her to go to the emergency room. She refused. I was away, and I was so worried that I was killing her, that like that me having a career in music was like leading to her wanting to commit suicide. And I didn't understand what was going on and why she would do that. And I hadn't done anything wrong, but I felt this tremendous guilt. And that's the response that is elicited by loved ones of people with it, because they just don't understand what they're doing wrong to deserve for them to just feel like they need to die. And so the roadie happened to be a psychologist, and was taking time off from his job at a hospital to go on tour to be the roadie to see the country. And I told him what my worries were, and I said, I got to call that person. I mean, I think, I feel like I'm killing them. This is the right relationship. I don't know if it can sustain this. I was really tore up about it. And he goes, oh, sounds like she has borderline personality disorder. I was like, what? Borderline personality disorder? And then he explained the whole thing about how that was like a natural reaction, that she would do something like that. It was very common. And I just like the weight lifted off my shoulders, like, oh my gosh, it's not my fault. I'm not killing her by being a musician. I'm not killing her by rehearsing. I felt such a relief, but just knowing, I mean, knowledge, just knowing what ails you or anyone else can really be empowering. And in that case, I felt much better about it. And he said, well, next time she does that, do you just need to call 911? And because you've asked, you've tried to help and she's not hearing you, she's dissociated. You've got to keep her, you've got to, do the least amount of harm as possible and set boundaries. And so the boundary was I called 911. They came, they kept her for 3 days until they released her and bandaged up and stitched up. And you just have to look out how to do the least amount of harm in those situations when they get bad. So I'd say advice to someone that's living with the most extreme forms is try to do the least amount of harm, because it's really hard to do any good until someone really gets therapy and gets help and does something like dialectical behavioral therapy, which takes a year at least. And you have a lot of contact with the therapist and a close relationship. The therapist that teaches the person the skills that they need to get through that emotional dysregulation and the dissociation that comes with it. And it's really hard work and a hard road, but it's almost like recovering from any serious illness. It takes time and it takes care and it takes love and it takes a lot of support and from the community and from the loved ones of the person. And it takes a lot of dedication on their part to want to change and live better. It's a really hard way to live. It's a very difficult disease to live with.
Is that why you became a music therapist, to support people in their healing journey?
Yeah, I think that is why I became a music therapist. And I love music and therapy. And I'm in therapy and music. So, it's natural.
Of course. But so, Dr. Moriarty, we talked quite a bit about, the loved ones, families, friends, partners, who may or may not be living with BPD. But now let's take a switch a little bit and go to the workplace setting. We know that employers have ADA programs and things like that, but what if there's an employee who didn't disclose that they had BPD? I mean, of course, not everyone's required to disclose anything, but what if something happens to the employee living with BPD? How can colleagues and employers support that individual?
That's a real tough one, because I know that most people, I think, that have that don't know. And unless they've been in therapy and have been diagnosed, they just think that they probably just have a real hard time holding a job. I think that it's probably something that you're not going to hear from the employee. It's probably something the employee's not going to really know. But you might notice someone not getting along with colleagues, or in relationships with colleagues that are too intense, maybe love relationships, or another sort of symptom or behavior of someone with BPD is sexual acting out and impulse control issues. They're doing anything to feel normal, to feel better, or to feel the dopamine and serotonin, or to feel anything to feel normal and to feel better, and like what they think normal people feel. And so they're constantly, oftentimes, that involves drugs and alcohol, and sexual overt sexual behavior. And so you might see that on the job and kind of wonder if someone has that going on, and ask them if they're seeing a therapist, and if they maybe have a diagnosis of that. And then it would give you an idea of how serious it is, and how it's probably not going to be a one-time thing, and that maybe talk to them about getting some help with the human resources department, or whoever can help in that regard, and realize that therapy is just as important as medical treatment sometimes.
So aside from, and thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge. So I mean, a lot of us here are either business owners or work for an employer and things like that. So uh, aside from going to HR and possibly using EAP as a support tool in getting the resources that the person would need, what else can we do as colleagues or direct reports or bosses, employers, to create a more sensitive and a respectful environment at work?
Well, you could be nicer to your employees. You could maybe have like a more casual sort of um, outings, or ways to, during retreats, or employee appreciation sort of events, or some way to make employees feel validated and that their work is appreciated, and that they are an integral part of the process, whether they're working at the as a reception person, or as, and also just respect their individuality and their differences and their DEI, and know that stuff, despite whatever politics might be expressed by leadership or the company at large or the community, that those things are extremely important, and that they should be respected, and that they validating somebody's personal experience is just as important, on the job as it is anywhere else, in the family or anywhere else. So that's something to set those boundaries with maybe other forces of your company or the government that tends to be less sensitive to people's individual values and families and the people that they love. That's my opinion.
There was actually an example at my job, at one of my jobs that I used to have before, where if if this employee did not get something that they were expecting right on time or in a specific way that they asked, they would have an emotional outburst. Now, is that something that's a characteristic that we can look out for somebody who has BPD, or
Yeah,
like
maybe so.
like it's emotional versus somebody who has a personality disorder? So how would you differentiate that?
It's really hard. I mean, it's really hard because oftentimes someone will dissociate, so they'll actually seem checked out, like unemotional and completely flat. So I think it's really impossible for someone that's not really trained in a clinical setting to diagnose and assume that somebody has a mental health disorder. I would say just be sensitive and open and listen to what the employee says. I mean, that's all you can really do. I think it's really tough to expect that you could preempt someone having a mental health crisis at work by, I mean, I think just the basic respect and checking in with people is the best that someone could be expected to do. But I'm not an HR expert. I'm not a um, you know, I'm not a person that works in a corporate background, so I can't really say. Although I did work at Kaiser for several years, and San Francisco General Hospital, it was different now. It was a teaching hospital, and as an HMO, it wasn't, and it wasn't in the mental health department, so I can't say.
Got it. And while you were talking, I had a question in my mind, but I completely slipped off. Oh yeah, I just remembered now. And that is, d- are you able to, or do you have an opportunity to share a success story if you can, or a success story of someone in progress or progressing really well in their therapy or treatment?
Sure. I mean, there are treatments now for trauma, for PTSD, that I think in concert uh, with dialectical behavioral therapy. There's like EMDR. There's a lot of acronyms in the therapeutic world. There's eye movement desensitization and reprogramming, EMDR. It's a therapy that employs like eye movement and tapping sides of your body and stimulating both sides of your brain in order to sort of process information that is from also generated by trauma, maybe early childhood trauma. So anyway, I guess the optimistic look is that there's a lot of research and a lot of treatment and a lot of breakthroughs in non-invasive treatments for trauma that must boil down to borderline personality disorder and that particular diagnosis for people. So I think there's a lot of hope in the field that there's a broader understanding and a broader sort of array of treatments for dealing with trauma, and just the awareness of it can move mountains. Just the awareness of certain things as being real, because I don't think even the term PTSD wasn't utilized until, I don't know, mid 70s, like after Vietnam. Someone could correct me there, but that's what I remember. So we're moving ahead and treating it, and like I think as people like you do shows, like pinpointing some of the issues that that occur that's really helpful in educating the community about it so that it can have less impact on people's lives.
Do you have a success story though, like a patient of yours is who's doing really well, who was formerly diagnosed with BPD and doing well right now?
I'm sure I do. I wouldn't want to highlight anyone's name or even really discuss their personal situation in case it could be identified because I haven't prepared. But there are people that live their entire lives and live very well after having a diagnosis of BPD. Especially just doing therapy and being active in therapy and being aware of yourself and understanding how your behavior influences others and how you might be able to mitigate that by just working on yourself. I think, yeah, there's been dozens of people I've worked with that probably have had that diagnosis that are doing really well. It's really possible and quite likely that one could do very, very well as long as they're engaged in therapy.
Got it. Okay. So I guess one of my questions then is when you're talking about DBT as a therapy tool for people living with
Uh-huh.
borderline personality, is there like any medication involved? I sorry I'm asking this question because I've never really, you know, read more about
Uh-huh.
DBT, but is there like physical medication involved?
I don't know if there's a typical medication, but I know that they do use medication and uh, with therapy. I mean, psychotropic medication works best if someone is in therapy, at the same time. And there and medicine is also. I mean, I also think somatic sort of therapies and all different kinds of things, exercise, and any ways that like calm you, and meditation, especially meditation and mindfulness has been key in helping people with BPD and other personality disorders. So it's something that helps a lot. The medication is often used.
Got it. And Lee, who's joining us, thank you so much, Lee, for sharing this with us. That DBT has helped her with both borderline personality disorder and bipolar one. And I admire you for sharing that and with us, Lee. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing this because this is a whole new field for me, and it's always a good thing to not just learn live but also share the knowledge with other people as well, and find a common ground with somebody who might be living with it. And I guess my last question, since we only have 15 minutes left, Dr. Moriarty, and anyone else in the audience who's listening, please feel free to share your experiences or a question or two that you may have. We only have 15 more minutes left. So I guess my last question for you is for our audience, if they'd like to support someone who may be living with BPD but aren't sure how, what's a good place to start?
Ooh, really good question. Um, really good question. There are some books by Marcia Linehan who actually wrote the book on treatment on dialectical behavioral therapy, because she is an author and an educator, professor at the University of Washington, where I studied, and she she wrote the book. I think it's just called Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, and there's a workbook that goes along with it that teaches you. So they're self-help books for folks that have the issue, and they detail like how to feel safe in your environment and how to deal with the triggers. So books by Marcia Linehan, and there's also videos that she has that talk about where it is, or look up, find therapists that claim to specialize in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and that's a really good way to get to help, or ask your therapist about it if you're in therapy. How can I help my cousin, my sister, my loved one, my partner who has DBT? I mean, who has all these acronyms is difficult. BPD, and
BPD.
just educate yourself. Just knowing, knowledge is power, and knowledge can take you out of the cave and into the light, so to speak, in dealing with it. And that's really a good way to start, by getting educated about it.
Got it. So, so in a nutshell, we just need to know that people who are living with not bipolar, well, bipolar as well, and also borderline personality disorder, They are not broken people. They are humans
Oh,
just like you and I. They just need patience and calmness and care, uh,
love, yeah, and understanding and patience. You're right, absolutely.
and empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
Let's not be too quick to judge on what someone else was going through, and calmly listen to them and then work with them versus just making assumptions about them. But also, I wanted to ask you, do you think BPD is genetic or is environmental or is a combination of both?
Well, I mean, there's evidence that that goes down to the nature or nurture question. Is it something that it's sort of the nature and lack of nurture question, right? Because these kids they don't get the nurturing that they need, and I think that there's some research that states that there's a genetic component. There's a genetic component to it, and I don't know, exactly what the percentage of nature versus nurture it is, but it's very much a learned behavior. But I think that someone could have the tendencies through their genetics or through their parents, um, their parents sort of mental makeup that they inherit some of the tendencies to develop the behavior later. So I would say that there is a genetic component, but there's also largely it's an environmental and education component. A
Got
lack
it.
thereof, yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And our sponsor is thanking us for asking questions about genetics, and I'm glad that Nicole is here to
Yeah,
support. And of course, Dr. Qureshi myths help with emotional regulation, anger, impulsivity, while therapy oh my god, I can't read that word. Modalities help heal from attachment wounds, boundaries, and prepping interpersonal conflict.
absolutely. Meds help with emotional strain issues and yeah, so forth.
I'm so glad Dr. Q is here. It's always good to hear her talk about different topics as a therapist. And so there's some words that, people who are not aware of different things about other people, they can use things like you're being too sensitive, a lot of gaslighting involved, too intense, you too hard to read, all of that stuff, or you're being too emotional. What can we use, what words can we use to better communicate with individuals
Oh,
who are having
oh,
uh,
that's a very good question. What words can we use? Well, we can try not to accuse people of things and try not to use absolute statements like "you always do this," or "you never do that," or "you said you would do this," or "you," like that sort of accusatory response to that is not helpful. And you just you it's like a lot of the message they'll teach you in Al-Anon or Alcoholics Anonymous, or if your loved ones with someone with a drug or alcohol problem, is that you stay on your side of the street. You work on your thing. You don't try to fix other people. You don't get in there and try to fix someone else. You don't allow their issues to or their reaction to draw you in, and you try to stay steady with your emotions. Well, because their emotions are going to be so dysregulated and so difficult to predict that you just stay in your own lane, and um, when someone else is erratic and all over the place with their behavior, the way to approach that is to be steady and consistent and loving and kind, and just stay calm and don't try to fix everything, because you can't do it. And
yeah,
yeah, you don't want to be codependent. You want to be an ally, in essence.
definitely be an ally. I mean, and when we say the word ally, we don't necessarily mean, yeah, I will support you, but allyship is also taking action to
Hmm.
support you when you're not there,
Right, right. So that they
standing up for
always
you,
feel support.
advocating for you.
Hmm.
So, you mentioned books, Dr. Moriarty, but a lot of people like myself, we watch media, we watch content online, and not just online, but we watch TV shows, we watch movies. And I know that one of my favorite movies called Identity focuses a lot on DID, or multiple personality disorder,
Was that with who's that with?
John Cusack.
And
And I'm forgetting the other actors, but
there was
uh,
another one called the United States of Tara with with this Australian actress, United States of Terror. It was about a woman with DID,
Mm.
dissociative
But
identity disorder.
I wanted to ask you if you have any recommendations of any movies or TV shows from your experience who that identify BPD for the people who may not know much about the
Um, I don't
um,
know if they identify, but there are a lot of movies that actually that if it's unfortunately oftentimes it's pinned on or regulated to a female character, and I think 75% of people that are diagnosed with it are female, but I don't believe that that's true. I think it's probably more like 50-50 men and women, because men and women both experience the same kind of emotional dysregulate or emotional invalidating, have their feelings invalidated by caretakers. I think men are often labeled as psychos or stalkers, or or uh, or uh, or just macho and fine. Like they act out, and their behavior is tolerated more than women's behavior, than female behavior. And I think that's just a product of our society, of our system, of the way things are set up. But uh, oftentimes the movies, there'll be a strong female character that seems to be a little out there. Betty Blue is one movie. So I remember thinking, oh, this person probably has borderline personality disorder. United States of Terror was another one. I think it was made by Steven Spielberg, and it was a miniseries on HBO, I think, or Showtime in the 2000s. I think what else?
Girl Interrupted. It seems like was one of and Black Swan with Natalie Portman.
Oh,
If it,
probably. It's oftentimes portrayed by, or Girl Interrupted, maybe. It's often portrayed by like a young, like a sexually, like
Promiscuous.
promiscuous character that's you're supposed to be drawn to as a viewer. That's a stereotype of that behavior, because they have impulse issues, problems with impulse control. So it makes for Hollywood movies, right? So sex sells, so to speak. So I think that's kind of a disgusting portrayal of it, and I don't know that media is the best way to get an idea of that. More so, explore videos on YouTube about treating it, like by Marsha Linehan especially, and educational videos about it, to really know about it. Like watching movies and things is can be really a romanticized version of something that's not romantic at all, and especially with suicide rates as they are with people with that disorder.
Exactly. Just look at Law and Order, as I mentioned in the very beginning, that the criminal intent franchise of it referred to bipolar disorder as BPD, which was incorrect as it is. So,
Right, as borderline, yeah, as
yeah,
bipolar disorder, yeah, yeah.
exactly. So why ill educate yourself through media when you can have
Yeah, really, if it's serious, you don't want to look at that sort of thing.
exactly. And Lay, thank you very much for letting us know that your name is pronounced Lay, and mostly I need compassion and non-judgment.
Exactly.
Absolutely right. Yep. And we are all about compassion and non-judgment here. We're all friends here, and Dr. Q said develop set boundaries and repair interpersonal conflict.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And
Set
then
boundaries and functions, yes. It was Tony Collette. Thank you, whoever that was. Identity was Cusack and Ray Liotta. Yes. Excellent.
Ray Liotta. Okay, so in a nutshell, if because we're coming close to time, Dr. Moriarty, and you know that I value nothing but the guests' time who are on the show who donate their time and their education for the betterment of humanity out there. So in a nutshell, if you were to describe borderline personality disorder in the simplest terms for someone who may not be exposed to it before, how would you define?
I would describe it as an extremely painful personality disorder that really affects the diagnosee with like extreme feelings of loneliness and exclusion, and uh, leading to like really volatile. That's not very simple, is it? As very sensitive person that has a hard time reading others, and may exhibit um, acting out in a way that's alienating to people around them, and that it's a really hard way to live, and things to watch out for, like cutting and self harm, and to be compassionate. And as one of our listeners said, that that they need compassion and not judgment, and that it's something that's very, very difficult to live with, and yeah, support and reassurance that you're gonna stick with them. It's a very difficult thing to live with, um, and they could really use our help.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And I think one last question I have is, you talked about people living with BPD may self harm, or some do self harm, but then what about harming others physically?
I
So,
don't
is,
think that that's really um, a symptom of that, of harming others. I think that sure, it occurs. There's a lot of harm that people do with that are emotionally reactive to other people, but I don't believe that that's really would be assigned to someone more so with BPD than anything else. I think it more would be turned inward towards themselves than towards others, for
got
sure.
it.
I think
Okay.
so. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And Dr. Moriarty, we are almost at the end of the hour. And I do want to say that I personally am so thrilled and so excited that you were able to join us. And we had some amazing people join us in the audience as well. And folks, if you said something within the LinkedIn chat or YouTube chat and I did not say it out loud, it's not because I'm purposely ignoring you. It's because sometimes not all chats come through. So my apologies if if your comment did not either show up or if I did not say it out loud. But do know that you're still here. We're all here, and we all appreciate, or at least I appreciate, Dr. Moriarty's time and knowledge sharing with us. And of course, Nick, you and the Guiding Brilliant Writers company, thank you very much for sponsoring this episode. If you anybody in the audience would like to sponsor our future episodes for OZK Studios What the Duck series, I put the QR code right there on the what is this called, on the banner. So
On the
please
banner.
on the banner. So please feel free to check us out. Or if you don't want to sponsor, that's okay too. A small donation would really really help us get a more educated people. Well, you're educated as well, everyone's educated, but more experts to come in and share their knowledge with us based on specific topics that we may not even know about. As an example, next month on August, we have someone all the way from Melbourne, Australia, coming in and talking to us about her being a mom of four who lives with ADHD and has three of four of her kids are all neurodivergent in one way or the other. And when I was talking to her, she talked about the same acronyms thing. And I've never heard those acronyms in psychology before. So it was so refreshing to learn something new from her. And she's going to be joining us next month on August 14th and
Great.
sharing more about herself and also her kids and diagnosis and how they live daily with those diagnoses.
All right, Tim. Thank you, Noni. That was great.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moriarty. And once again, anybody else who would like to learn more about Dr. Moriarty, I will go ahead and post his link in the comment section. And feel free to add each other on LinkedIn or any of the social media. I've been I've been tagging Dr. Moriarty's LinkedIn profile like a maniac and all the posts that I'm doing, so you can easily find his name and add him. And Dr. Moriarty, you do the same. And once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Dr. Moriarty. Thank you, every single person joining us. And thank you, Daddy Kenny, for sending the invites to all your millions of friends out there. I hope you all have a fabulous rest of the day. And we will see you next month. And if you have any suggestions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to accommodate and learn more about whatever it is that you know of that I may not know of. So fantastic. Have a great rest of the day. Bye bye.